Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve podcast takes a close-up look at controversial subject matter and hot-button topics, adding humor, cynicism, and a dose of reality to the stuff we're not supposed to talk about anymore. Politics, religion, sex, gender identity, violence, corruption. Nothing is left unturned in this lighthearted approach to information dissemination. The world is experiencing a pandemic of cowardice. 80% of people do not believe the craziness they've been coerced to agree with. Grab a friend, grab a beverage, and dive in with us as we take on the narrative and blast social stigmas with truth. Here are your hosts, Patriots Ray Amanat and Steve Reed.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody out in social media land, Facebook land, YouTube, and the OBBM network. Welcome to Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve. I'm Ray Amanat here in sunny Port Richey, Florida, where I realize it's getting kind of cold up north in the 30s and 40s. It is getting a little chilly out here, too. At nighttime, it's usually around 77 degrees or whatever. But let's bring in our co-host, Mr. Steve Reed, who I think, you're getting the chill also?
Well, yeah, it got down into the 30s and 40s. So, yeah, I know. But on the other side of the coin, it's about 70 degrees where I am right now.
Yeah, that's what it is at nighttime over here. So
yeah,
you can keep your jacket and coat weather. I'm gonna stay in my t-shirts and shorts out here.
Ray, I heard last week that there are 3 seasons in Florida: hot, hotter, and hurricane.
Yeah, pretty much.
And here in Texas, we have hot, hotter, and tornado. So, Ray, what in the world is going on?
Today, we have a very interesting guest on our show. I met him at a speaker's event. By day, he is a high-tech robotics executive and engineer, but his passion is being the founder of the All-American Movement and author of 2 books. Welcome, Mr. Dave Cary. Hello, Dave.
Hi, Ray and Steve. You guys are hilarious. This is great. I appreciate you having me on.
It doesn't get any better. I promise.
Hopefully, we and your audience will have a good time today. So.
Oh, we will. And speaking of which, if you want to put the disclaimer up where...
Yes, Ray.
And then we'll dive in. So, Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve is an opinion-based program and does not necessarily reflect any other program, guest affiliation, or sponsors. So, whatever Steve or I say, it doesn't really affect Dave, even though it might affect Dave. We just don't know. So, Dave, how did you get into this movement you created, and what is its focus? Tell us about you and how everything got started.
Okay. Well, I never expected to get into anything political. It's kind of distasteful to me in general. It's anyway, but I live in Northern California. Live in a town between San Francisco and Napa, and we're actually America's most diverse city. I'm in a 40-year interracial marriage, have a couple what I call all-American boys, and I thought a life skills and basketball camp would be kind of my way of paying it forward, and we were doing that. Our school district completely failed. We received the largest per capita bailout in California state history. Our academic performance is we're only about 15% of the kids are really ready for college. And then our city government failed. The Great Recession hit us pretty bad, and probably a third of the homes were overpriced, and got a lot of foreclosures, and literally almost a dozen kids we know or coached have been shot by other teens, and one sadly even died. And so it's kind of one of those things. I'd watch the news and I'd hear the proposed solutions really from both sides, and read the news, and I'd see here's a story and here's a headline, and they'd show this data, and having a math and science background, I'd look at the data and say, well, that's not right. That headline doesn't match the graph, right? And so I started writing to newspapers, and very few of the op-eds would get in, and so started writing some books, and we tried to start a charter school years ago. So one of the books, Pimping the Poor, is on our socioeconomic and those kind of issues, and the other, A Nation at Even Greater Risk, plays off the original and talks about what we learned on our journey to help all of our kids, regardless of circumstance, win. So yeah. So, and what are we focused on? Really, we're focused on America's economic, education. Race obviously plays into it, and leadership issues. We're not the guys to come talk to about climate change or how to improve healthcare or roads or anything like that. But if you want to talk about all the myths and in our economic narrative today, or education, we have a lot to say, we think. So
Dave, would you say that we are illiterate when it comes to economics?
Yeah, how do I put this? Because I've reached out to guys on the national news, guys with PhDs in economics, about some of the things they're saying, and frankly, I'm starting to think they couldn't diagnose a zit on a pepperoni pizza loving teenager. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, to talk about poverty, inequality, middle class, the pay, education, a dying dream. Their narrative is just totally distorted and doesn't represent what I think most people would find is truth. And so
it just makes you want to at the TV, right?
yeah. And unfortunately, I used to put the news on when I'd ride the treadmill upstairs, so I would see too much of it. I should have just turned it off.
Your heart rate would go up faster watching the news than being on the treadmill.
Yeah, so pretty good.
Oh, mercy. So Dave, okay, so you have introduced a book, or you authored a book not too long ago. Tell us a little bit about Pimping the Poor.
Yeah.
What does that have to do?
Yeah, so first thing we do, this is a book that really diagnoses the real causes to poverty, inequality, the shrinking middle class, pay, not as much education. I leave that for the other book. And then the so-called dying dream, and shows how the first thing we do is show how we're being pimped, okay, on these issues. And then we get into then the logical solutions, what we call the prosperity pyramid. But yeah, so it's really just a book that started out of here's what you're being told. The data doesn't show that. Here's, if you peel away the onion and say, okay, well, what does cause poverty? We look at each of those different items and show what the statistics and what logic would present as the real cause. And there's really no connection whatsoever to capitalism and the free enterprise system. Most of these things are centered in our failure to educate our kids, and I don't want to use family structure as a crutch, but there's certainly a connection there. So that's what this book does. And so all these I hate to call them lies, but misdiagnosis, right? Is people are not identifying the real roots, and you can't heal a problem until you identify the real source of the ailment, and then the prescription follows. And that's one of the things I learned. I spent 3 years of my career as a quality manager, and fixing chronic problems like poverty you have to use a different tool set than if you've got a hole in your wall and you're going to fix it with some drywall. It's not the same kind of, everybody can fix a patch in their house, but solving chronic problems like education and economics require you to understand statistics a little bit. You have to be able to know how to prioritize, and then how to be a companion. And so we make it really easy, really fun. It's that, there's lots of graphs and charts, but they're presented in a way that, frankly, my mother, who's never studied any of this stuff, has been able to understand. So,
so Dave, a couple of things. Number one, I like where you're going with this. You may or may not know the name Candace Owens. She was a young Black woman. She's testifying in front of Congress, and they're talking about how bad white supremacy is, and so forth and so on. And they're they are bludgeoning her from the left side of the aisle, and they're talking to all of these elite educator types, and there were either 2 or 3 white women and a white guy, academics and so forth. And she says, I think that it's interesting that you would bring 3 white people in to talk about what's going on in the Black community, and you're saying that it's white supremacy, when in fact, if you asked a Black family, that would be so far down on the chart of problems. And the top 2 problems are, number one, a horrible education system, a disaster of an education system, and number 2, fatherless homes.
Yeah.
So, and you alluded to that. So are you saying, based on your research, are you saying those are some of the dominant reasons why we are having a failed outcome in our schools?
Yeah.
So
was
Candace
jobs,
Owens right?
If they don't have jobs, you can't earn an income, right? And so one of the things, so I'm going to ask you a couple questions. So what would if I said our school is doing better or worse today than when we were kids, from an outcome standpoint, right?
I would say worse, because they're dumbing down the criteria of what students need to actually graduate.
I
for some schools, not all schools, schools.
Dave, that's a trick question, because I think the outcome is different.
It is a trick question. Okay.
Yeah,
so
it depends on your perspective on what better or worse is. Are we producing more baristas? Absolutely. I remember back when I was in high school, they had black coffee. If you wanted cream, here's the jug. Okay. Yeah. That was it. None of the, Kappa Fufu, whatever things back in the 70s. So we're producing that. We're producing basket weavers. We're producing, a lot of philosophy majors that we didn't produce those back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yeah.
But now we are.
Which I won't go, that will leave us in a different direction in the book, which we talk about, something I call the Great Transition. Great Recession is simply a symptom of the Great Transition, okay? But when we go back to education, so it really talks about what we're focused on. So, yeah, there's a lot of talk these days about how we're going to teach race in schools and kumbaya stuff, and not that is, but
exactly.
But, okay, what we're focused on is getting these kids the fundamentals and more, but it starts with the fundamentals, and that's what my question kind of. So most people are really unsure, and it's partly because educational results. If you look at 4th grade, they're better, right? The test scores are better. If you look at 8th grade, they're a little bit better. If you go to 12th grade, which is really, to me, the output of the K-12 system and all that matters, it's dead flat for 50 years. No change, right? So No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, all these initiatives that we've spent trillions of dollars on haven't done anything to make a kid more likely to be able to succeed in college or beyond.
And so the question then is, when you compare the U.S. education system and the outcomes to some of the Chinese or some of the other Asian countries, I'll say Asian countries in general, they're teaching calculus to 8th graders. I could barely spell calculus. So what's going on there? Are we just not teaching the kids the right things, or what's the problem?
Well, 18 of the 19 countries ahead of us all have a longer day, longer year. It's really that simple. So our model for education is a longer day, longer year. Okay, so you're going to hear all these things about curriculum, smaller class sizes. All these things are nothing but myths that allow schools to hire more educators that cost money without a result. Okay, so there is, sorry, so our neighbors making some background noise there. But the long and short of it is that the reason the kids that are failing in our country fail is they're not doing enough homework. Okay, they're not studying enough. The average black kid in America does less than 4 hours of homework a week. The average white does 6, and the average Asian does 8 or more. So what our suggestion is to create what I call a new era school model, which is a longer day, longer year, longer core class time, and you finish the homework in the class with the teacher and other students there to help you, right? I mean, picture yourself as a young man going to class, lecture, 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 don't do the homework, go the next day, repeat, repeat, repeat. You're going to have that segment fall behind, right?
Yeah.
Well, now picture instead if they did the homework in class and stayed current. Well, you wouldn't have the biggest problem in our nation, in my opinion, and really I think the facts support it, is the diversion happens at puberty, right? You've got guys who are falling behind in class with girls, and guess what they're going to do? They're going to say, I'm either going to look stupid or I'm going to act up. And so you got kids who try to study and try to learn, and they act up. And that's just, I think of this whole thing as like a video game, right? The kids that are given extra lives, their parents are prosperous, they're well educated, they've got these extra advantages, are going to have a little bit more resilience and or just pick up through osmosis the right things to do. Whereas you've got kids in neighborhoods like Oakland or Baltimore that there's a lot of distractions. Both parents might be working. If there are even both parents, parents might not even be from the U.S. or speak the language. So our paradigm shift is that it's naive to believe that every parent has the time, energy, inclination, effort, and resources to effectively tutor every one of their kids and every one of their subjects. It's not going to happen. In today's world, my wife's a professor, I'm a high-tech engineer, and we didn't have the time to spend with our kids that we wanted to. So what makes us think that every kid is going to have that? And so create instead a model that wins for everybody, and do it. We believe it's possible to do for what we're spending now or less. In fact, we know
we need to take a break. So tell us more about the model when we come back from this break. Good. And Ray, how are you doing?
That's what I want. Latch on as soon as you can, make it hard. If I stand on one leg, can you yank me off balance? Yeah. If I stand feet wide, can you pull me off balance? Come on, what's the matter with you? How you doing? What was the first thing she did? She walked away, she took her eyes off of me. She looked away. I take her purse, I run. She goes to security, she goes to law enforcement. They're gonna say, well, what did he look like? And you're gonna be like, it happened so fast, I didn't see him coming. You didn't see him coming because I made you feel uncomfortable, and you took your eyes off me and walked away. The whole point is, and this does not mean I want you to go and flirt and talk to the person, or I don't want you to go, I see you. I just want you to, that's a cool shirt. I'd like to get that because my kids are in soccer. I'm letting you know I'm aware of you. I'm letting you know I can describe you.
How you doing? Laugh every time. So how's Ray doing?
It gets. You can go ahead and bring Dave back on also.
That was
He's
good.
probably. Thank you.
That was really good.
We've got a lot of events coming up. I've got my first webinar this Friday, 7 o'clock Eastern time. If you go to my Facebook page at Ray Amanat, you can get the link to that. It's going to be a discussion on the power of words, where if you have somebody that is a problem in your life, whether it's at home, at work, at school, wherever you're at, what words can you use that would de-escalate the situation versus escalate it? And you're either burning bridges with customers or you're creating an opportunity for a violent physical confrontation. We want to teach people how to avoid all that. As that would be this Friday, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we've got other seminars coming up. It's made possible by donations. Heroes in Action is a non-profit organization, so your donations help us go a long way with offering programs for free to the public. If you are a business and would like to sponsor an event and get your brand out as well, get a hold of us. You can go to our website at heroesinaction.us or email me at ray@heroesinactionnow.org, and let's have a discussion on how we can make our homes, schools, and communities a lot safer to live in.
Very cool. That'll be fun. So Friday night at 7 o'clock Eastern, is that what she said?
Yep.
Now, do they just, type in Ray's webinar or?
No, there's a link that's on my Facebook page that we've created an event. They go to that and get the link from there and just sign in through the link.
And your Facebook page again is?
It's just my name, Ray Amanat, but I've got it on the Heroes in Action Facebook page. I'll put it on the Taboo Talk Facebook page. So everyone can get access to it and come. I've put a lot of research and detail into this to give you guys some good nuggets on how to deal with problems.
If somebody had known more about this upcoming event, then somebody could have done a little bit more for a little graphic, but somebody.
I could have, but I didn't.
Yes.
But that's okay.
I think that
We're telling everyone right now.
Dave, back to you. Tell us about the model.
Well, yeah. So the model really was, conceived out of what was more or less obvious to me of why the kids were not winning. And so in our case, we came up with also what we think is an innovative school design, facility design. So the idea was a middle school, high school, art and recreation center in the middle. And our idea was to have that open from 6 a.m. in the morning to 11 at night, almost 360 days a year. And so the kids would go to get dropped off at the school. If the parents wanted to work out, whatever, have some coffee, then get off to work. The kids would be taken care of. They'd finish their homework in class with the teachers. The longer day, longer year lets you do some more experience, entrepreneurship. So in our case, New Era, the mission was to develop entrepreneurial Renaissance athletes fit to challenge life and strengthen mankind. And so it's not.
So when are you gonna get back at it and try to get that thing running?
When Jeff Bezos gives me $100 million instead of Van Jones. So, Anyway, so as I was telling Steve earlier, that this all started out of trying to start what we think is an unparalleled charter school and experience, and we ended up, after years of that effort, traveling the country, learning from winners, spending a lot of money and time, and almost getting there. I mean, we had the head of the Gates Foundation fly down here. Everybody told us they loved the model, but didn't really. There was always a catch-22.
So through all your traveling and all of your research, it looks like you found that there's a lot more Americans that favor socialism. Why is that?
Yeah, that too. Let me kind of finish this. So what we have found from an education standpoint is that there are about 2% of our kids in our country go to what I call an odds-beating school. So we do know that this model works, not necessarily under the name New Era, but under KIPP or Aspire or Jeffrey Canada's Harlem Children's Zone. So we know it works, but only 2% of our kids are going to an odds-beating school. And so that's what the second book, A Nation at Even Greater Risk, details, is what did we learn from the winners? How do we implement that across the board so every kid, any kid from anywhere, has a real opportunity to win, and that'll take care of everything else. So so going back, you asked me about socialism. I think that I just see more, just you read the news, you talk to kids. I was at dinner with a couple of young men, and for instance, we young engineers, and one of the guys started talking really things that in my mind were socialistic narratives, right? And so he started talking, for instance, about CEO pay and how unfair it was. And so I said, well, what do you think the average CEO in America makes? So what would you guys answer to that? Right. So we've got a lot. The socialists in the country have got basically an effort to say that poverty is on the rise, inequality is caused by capitalism, that the middle class is shrinking, that pay is unfair, and that the dream is dying. And that's got the young and minorities and housewives and everyday Americans thinking, well, it's time. The economic system isn't working, right? So that's a fundamental tenet. If our economic system isn't better than everybody else's, why shouldn't we go to socialism? I would agree. Okay. In fact, I'm driving home listening to the radio. Karen Hunter's got some guy by the name of Tom Hartman on, and they're whining about the same things. They're saying the middle class is shrinking, people's futures, they're not going to live as well as their children. Well, the truth is actually that's totally untrue, right? So the middle. Why do you think the middle class shrank in America? What would be the typical person's answer?
Oh gosh, there's a whole host of reasons. So the typical person would not talk about taxes and regulations and that sort of thing. They may come back frequently and say, well, it's the upper class that's putting down the middle and lower class.
Yeah. So how about you, Ray? I mean, do you think when you hear the middle class is shrinking, do you feel good or bad about that?
I feel bad about that because that means the lower class is growing. Well, you're either an elitist or you're at the bottom of the food chain. It's about getting the lower class to rise up to middle class and upper class.
Well, and that in essence is the brainwashing.
Right.
You've both been brainwashed, and let me explain why. Okay, all of America's been brainwashed. Okay, it's because you're assuming by the tone of the apocalyptic tone that the middle class is shrinking. The middle class is shrinking. Well, do you know why the middle class shrank? It's not because more became poor. It's because the middle became rich. So what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. We just have to get the poor to move up as well. So what's actually happened is the average American family makes 60% more in inflation adjusted income than we did when I was a kid. 60% more in inflation adjusted income. That's showing that the free enterprise system, despite all the drag on it,
Right.
is the best system in the world. Okay, it's by far, free enterprise has by far created greater prosperity than anything else ever. And so we've been told the middle class is shrinking. It's because we all identify ourselves, whether we're rich or poor. I would tell people I'm middle class. It's because it's a characteristic or character value is what it's become. We think of Happy Days or the Cosby Show or whatever it might be as a middle class family, and we identify with it. But economically, what's happened is the middle class, 1 in 5 middle class families is now considered rich. Okay, so we've had greater prosperity over the last 40 years than that. We're living better than anybody in our country ever has. But
Now, is that rich in comparison to what? What it was 50 years ago, or other countries, or both, or what? Rich compared to what?
So economists have different categories that say you're poor, you're lower middle class, you're middle class, you're upper middle class, or upper class. That's those inequality curves you see, right? That's how economists will categorize people. And when you take the inflation adjusted incomes of those people, those curves are all going up. Even the poor, America's poor, their standard of living is up 30% over that period of time in inflation adjusted income, despite the average poor person in America dropped out of high school, is likely a single mother in their kids. And they don't average, the average person, the average hours worked in America's bottom 20% or the poor, contrary to what you hear of they're working 3 jobs, is 16 hours of work a week. All we have to do is get those people working and educated, and guess what? They're going to be living 2 and 3 times better, just like our middle class and rich are. So the problem is not capitalism. It's our education system is not helping our kids win. And so, and here's the difference. Remember we talked earlier about that education results are flat? Well, the problem is that over the last 40 or 50 years, our educational system, the number of kids ready for college, the number, the dropout has really remained stagnant because the agrarian model has stayed the same. Okay. Nothing's changed. Okay. And so what has changed is the job market, like you alluded to earlier, Steve. The current, back when we were kids, the workforce only needed a third of the students to come out college ready. Yeah. Today it's 2/3 and growing.
Right.
So the disconnect is between what jobs require and what our education system is producing. And so,
and with that said, you're talking about capitalism.
Yeah.
In a big way. So let's show what capitalism is all about.
Yeah.
Life isn't always sunshine and roses. Sometimes it's full of roadblocks. The kind that aren't as easy to fix as filling a hole or repairing a car. Personal roadblocks are another thing altogether. Why do I feel stuck? The same things anger me every time. Why am I doing this anyway? Fixing it yourself can be frustrating and confusing. And if more than one person is involved, DIY might mean destroy it yourself. Maybe it's time for another solution. Steve Reed shines a light on your roadblocks and helps you find the best way forward for you. Stephen Reed Ministries, bringing light and hope for a victorious life. To overcome your roadblocks, schedule an appointment with Steve Reed today.
I like that.
Amazing. And capitalism is definitely at work. So anyway, so one of the things that Dave and Ray, I love helping people get past some of those mindset roadblocks. And a lot of times the roadblocks are things like, well, I've never done things that way before, or my parents didn't do that, or that's not what I learned, or whatever, those outside influences that have told us that here's the ceiling and I can't get past that. So in my business coaching, I actually help people move that ceiling. Sometimes if we can, I've never met a person that could completely delete the ceiling. There's always going to be a ceiling there of some sort, and it's generally an artificial ceiling. But I work with a lot of women that over the years they've been told you can't do anything more than this. This is the max that you can do, and it's getting higher and higher. And I work with a lot of executive women business owners, and a lot of times they don't know who to talk to because the world has been suppressing them so much, and they don't know who to talk to. They can't talk to other women because a lot of other women don't understand what they're doing. They can't talk to other men because men are saying, well, you don't belong here oftentimes, and this is a man's world, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of women are feeling very isolated. I help them get past that isolation. I help eliminate those roadblocks and those artificial ceilings as people are trying to get ahead in the things that they're doing while maintaining balance in their lives. And that is a critical component. So Dave, back to you. What you're talking about is people just making sure that they have balance in their lives. Before we go back to you completely, Dave, if somebody wants more information, you can go to my website, which is StephenReedMinistries.com, and that's StephenReed Ministries.com. You can send me an email at info@StephenReedMinistries.com. I'd love to have a conversation with you, see what the roadblocks are. In fact, I'm doing some things with some strategy sessions right now, and let's do an initial session to figure out exactly what's going on, what the roadblocks are, and see how we can eliminate those roadblocks, or at least get the roadblocks under control for you. So that's one of the big things that I like doing, especially as we are coming up towards the end of the year. And I've got some fun things. I've got a Black Friday special that I'm going to be introducing in the next week or so. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I like it.
Absolutely, keep it on, right? Just none of the bleeping. That's all. So anyway,
sorry.
You guys are really charming. This is hilarious.
Dave, the program was so much more entertaining before Ray got his toy.
Yeah.
So now he
thinks
that's the only way he can.
Don't make me come over there.
Oh, mercy me. All right. Ray, where were we?
We were asking Dave how he would suggest that we create a much greater, wider spread of prosperity in America.
Yeah. So again, I think it comes back to first realizing you're being pimped. Okay. And then
So real quick, Dave,
yeah.
Who's the pimp? If we're the pimpies, if we're the ones that are being trafficked.
The experts, right? So all the people you see on the news, probably from both sides of the aisle, that cover, I don't know if you guys know the story. It comes from a story of the elephant and the six blind scholars. Have you ever heard of that story?
I have not.
Okay, so it comes out of Eastern India, and the concept is that these blind scholars go on a journey, and they happen across an elephant, and one grabs the tail and says, it's a rope. Another one grabs the tusk and says, no, it's a spear. Another grabs a leg and says, no, this is a pillar of a building. And they argue, and nobody ever sees the elephant in the room. And that's the point of this is a modern take using today's politicos to be the blind experts in the room, right? And
I
so
gotcha.
they're going to say that it's this, it's that, and they're just missing the elephant staring them in their face, right? So,
Interesting.
yeah. So that's where the cartoon cover comes from, and the pimp actually came from. I went to Cornell West's poverty tour, and the guy in front of me happened to be a black entrepreneur, and he says, "Well, I've listened to you guys, and I think you're really just pimping the poor." And I picked up on that, and they argued with him for about a half an hour. I was the next guy, and I said, "Hey, I think you're just misdiagnosing the problems." They blew me off, and anyway, so I love Cornell West, the man. His ideas are ridiculous from the standpoint of he has a whole book, and it talks about how poverty's on the rise and inequalities. And so the first thing to do is if you look at the poverty curves, is yes, you'll see the number of people living in American poverty is up, but the rate isn't. The rate, even at the height of the Great Recession, was in statistical control. They would focus in on a little section of the graph and say it's these 2 years are. But if you look at the trend, it's actually flat. Or if you take a new measurement called the supplemental poverty income during the Obama years, it would say that based on all the factors that poverty is actually down 50% over in history. I tend to use the flat because our mission is to end poverty and through education. And so that, but it's not up, that's for sure. Your chances of living in poverty are not greater. In fact, it's equal or less. So, and then we talked about, I do want to get back to one paradigm shifter for people too, is we talked about the CEO pay. I asked you, what does the average CEO make? What do you think the average person in America would say to that?
500,000 to $1 million.
Yeah, it's about right. About $1 million is what they usually say. What do you think the average CEO actually makes?
250, 300,000.
Yeah, but that's not even close. Now, what I do is I ask people, so if you bought something for $100, right? You bought those earphones in your head there, Steve, and they cost you $100. How much of that $100 went to the CEO?
Oh, probably about a penny, maybe two.
Okay, Ray?
Say that again.
If you bought the earbuds in Steve's ears for $100, right, how much went to the CEO?
I'd say 80% of it.
Okay, so you're actually, Ray is giving me the typical answer, which is most people think it's $20 to $80 of that 100 went to the CEO. Okay, the next big group I get is between $1 and $20. Okay, so most people think it. So Steve is actually almost dead nuts. It's 4 cents out of $100 goes to the CEO.
So, Dave, say that again. Are you saying that Steve is smarter than Ray?
No, but who's more charming?
We're not both.
There you go. Right? But think about it. So 4 cents out of 100 goes to the CEO. Now, is CEO pay out of line? Okay, well, if I doubled CEO pay, or let's say we made it a dime, 2.5 times raise for the CEO of my company, would a dime change you from buying $100 item? No, not one bit. Okay, now, so are you better off having paying for a good CEO or a bad CEO if you're the worker, right? Well, we don't know. Okay, so what if I took? Okay, in fact, we just had the whole labor strike in Detroit, right? I tried to send the Wall Street Journal an op-ed. They didn't even get back to me. But so take GM, right? So if we divided the GM CEO salary amongst every worker at GM, how much more would they make? Every worker. Any idea? Would it be a lot? A little? I mean, if she's making $29 million a year. It's not bad pay. Not bad pay, but it's a $159 billion company.
Yeah.
So if we divided her pay up amongst every worker, right? Let's fire the CEO. We don't need her, right? They'd make 70 cents more a day. Okay.
Wow.
Would I rather have a good CEO that ensures my job, helps me grow into my business, creates better cars, and brings prosperity and bonuses? Or do I want to fire that CEO and say that it's ridiculous? Now, let me ask, what I do in our classes is I ask, okay, so if the CEO is making 4 cents of that 100, how much is going to government?
Oh, we got to hold off on that because we got to pay one more bill.
Good.
So, but we will come back right after this.
Right. Entertainment expands your horizons, takes you on fantastic adventures, challenges your skills. Independent media never looked so good. Welcome to a new sphere of influence. Our words mean business. Traditional families are honored, and the American flag still flies.
And we love OBBM Network and all of the folks that we are affiliated with, whether it's on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, iTunes, Rumble, wherever it is. Thank you, OBBM. So if you want to advertise on OBBM Network, they would love to have you. We'd love to have you advertising our program as well. So, Dave, back to your question, how much does the government take out of that $100? And actually, they were $149, but who's splitting errors? Anyway, but out of that $100, the government takes about $94.
That's one way, yeah. But as a minimum, they're taking 40. And they're on their way to 50.
That is insane. That is insane.
So
and they bring no value to it. So
if you're someone who cares about workers making more money, is it more logical to go after the CEO or asking our government to just get a 10% more efficient? Then we'd have 100 times more income to spread across our workers.
Right.
It seems to me that we should just ask government to stop spending a little bit,
That's what we've been trying to do, but for whatever reason, people keep electing and re-electing these hawks that want to spend, because they're trying to keep their promises to their lobbyists, not the people that actually elect them in office.
That's where we go back to, I don't think either side is diagnosing or explaining the solutions properly. So we talked about the difference of a 50% tax. What if, maybe that was you and I talking earlier. So one of the questions I ask people is, so what would happen to our economy, your job, and your income if the government added a 50% tax to every U.S. product, but not to foreign-made products? What do you think would happen, Ray?
Let me do this one.
Right? If we added a 50% tax to U.S. products, but not the stuff coming in from China or Mexico or somewhere else, would we sell more or less American products?
We would sell less American products because everything, all the people would go to China to manufacture the products, and people would be buying all the cheap stuff.
Well, that's exactly what we've done. That's the point. That's what all this government spending and taxation and ridiculous idea that government is somehow going to redistribute the wealth and make us wealthier. It can't happen. It's impossible, right? So the average U.S. citizen, if we were able to cut that spending back to something more reasonable, say we did it by, we reduced spending back to historical averages, the average U.S. household would have more than $10,000 a year more in their pocket.
Yeah.
$10,000. That's not chump change. That's significant for almost anyone.
Right.
Go ahead. Let's sell some American products.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm looking at what looks like 3 American products right here. Pimping the Power, a nation even at even greater risk.
Yeah.
And what's the third one? Revolution.
The
Are these
Formula
your
for
three
a
books?
Revolution. Yeah.
Okay.
So the first two are books. The second
Okay.
one is kind of our vision for American schools, that the new era schools concept. So that one's a really good coffee table, 11 by full color, 11 by 11. You want to talk to people about education, you can. The Nation at Even Greater Risk is the book. The one on the right is a subset of Pimping the Poor. So if you're listening to this and saying, I'm still skeptical, Dave doesn't know what he's talking about, go to pimpingthepoor.com. I'd love it if you bought the book. I think it's best in color, either as an e-copy or a color hard copy, just because there's so many graphs and data in there that it's easier to read. It's more like a textbook. Then if you say, I just don't have the money or whatever, and you start to move away, you can get a free section of the book that explains at least how we're getting pimped.
That's cool.
Yeah. So,
so
go ahead.
What's this all about, Dave?
So just, again, to try to make things fun, we took our book and essentially have something you can print. So if you go to our website and on the first page, you click on this image, you can download this and this with a poem that tells that story. And it's a great way to talk about politics with your kids because they can color it, right? So just a tongue-in-cheek poem, and it tells the story of the elephant and the blind politician. Some of your kids may have heard that before in school, just not with the political twist to it. So as you read our book and learn how you're getting pimped, and you want your young kids to watch the news with a critical eye, that's a good way to get that conversation started. So,
and this is how people can get in touch with you. So why don't you read off your websites and because we got to wrapping things up.
So the main overarching website is weareallamerican.org, and if you go there, it'll give you more on our philosophies, get the books there. We are in the process of having webinars, what we call deep dives into these things. So if you sign up and join, we'll outreach back to you and tell you how to do that. Pimping the Poor is the specific website for buying or learning more about that book. New Era Schools talks about our school ideas, and then if you want to email me, you can at the contact at We Are All American. And then we're also doing a casting call. So on the bottom of the screen, it says, I am concerned, just like I'm concerned. And we're going to be interviewing everyday Americans and getting their thoughts and including them in a docu-series. So
and to our listening audience, it's imconcerned.com.
Great.
imconcerned.com.
Very cool. Very cool. This has been entertaining and enlightening. I have enjoyed this.
Me too.
Dave, you've given us a lot of really good things to think about and just really things to consider as we're going forward and as we're talking to our audience and other people, just getting a better education. And it sounds like that's the foundation of what you're talking about, is educating people on the truth, on exactly what's going on.
Well, it's like you were asking us questions, but then giving us a different lens to look into.
That's the whole point.
That was brilliant.
Thanks. Well, and for me, it's, you're Coach Steve and Ray. I'm, a different kind of coach, but I really think what's happened in our country, to sum it up, is we've got some cancers in the clubhouse, right? We've got people, Eeyore sitting there going, oh, the American dream is dead. It's dying. There's no point in getting an education. There's no point in working hard.
I don't have a Tigger button.
You're better off taking a universal income. It's ridiculous, right? It's absolutely There's never been a time in history where any person from anywhere can, not automatically, but can create something, market it, make an outstanding living, obstacles be damned. You're going to have them. My kids are going to have them.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can spit in the face of those obstacles in this country and say, I'm doing it anyway. And that's the American spirit that I believe in. And the people we want to help are those that have the longest odds, but part of that is getting the right game plan. And that's what we think our books outline, and the prosperity pyramid that talks about the foundation and schools, smaller government, and the smart tax are really, I think, things to think about as you've got an election and some choice to make in the years to come.
All right. We appreciate you helping educate the public on waking the cluck up, America.
And with that, we are out of time.
Thank you, guys.
Till next time, folks. Dave, thanks for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, have a fabulous, fabulous day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you having me on, and we'll talk soon. All right, take care. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve. If you have suggestions for topics you would like us to discuss, or you would like to become a sponsor, reach out to us today at tabootalkwithrayansteve@gmail.com. In the meantime, check out the other amazing programs on OBBM Network on all your favorite podcast platforms. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Join us again for another fun and informative opinion-based episode. This is Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve.